Triple H, you and him go way back for years and years and years. Now he's running the show at WWE after Vince sort of stepped away. Did you expect this to be what would happen, that Triple H should be running the show? And how have you found how he's done so far?
Well, for starters, to me, there was only one guy who was going to take that spot, and that was him. I mean, you have to understand, Triple H has been a student of the game, pretty much his teens. And as he came up and to be a worker and became one of the number one workers in the world, because he's part of the family, he doesn't really, because he doesn't let them give him the props. Now, when he could have come with entrances and come with work, he's coming, man. And he's going to leave his own impact. But it's kind of like Vince McMahon isn't in the Hall of Fame. You know what I'm saying? Most absurd thing ever. Vince McMahon, me and Dusty used to talk about what a great heel. We both considered him the best heel of all time. And just because of how he can flip it, babyface, heel, and what he did and what he said and the impact that he's had. So you notice he's not in the Hall of Fame. And Triple H is another one of those guys. I don't think he gets the credit that he deserves for being, the guy and one of the guys who carried that company on his back when we were kicking their ass. He was very instrumental with the whole DX thing, of course, and how they put all that together. So I know him from when I'm at the power plant training to be a wrestler. And I'll never forget, me and Terry Taylor, who was one of our coaches down there. Me and Terry Taylor and Triple H went to a strip joint. I know, hard to imagine. So he had gone to the bathroom, and I'll never forget it. Terry looked at me and he said, "I really like that kid. He's got your work ethic." And I said to him, I go, "Yeah, at his age, like I was 36, he was 22, and being around that, and knowing him the way I did, I was just waiting, for when, it happened and he actually got control. The TV, and not to take anything away from Vince at all, but the TV and the bloodline and the stories and, Logan Paul, this kid's got it at a different level because nobody can do what he's doing in the short amount of period of time. And I don't think he grew up a wrestling fan as a kid. I don't think he might have. But when I met him, he had no idea who I was. And that would say to me, well, then he didn't watch WCW at all, if he watched WWE occasionally. But that kid has such a natural gift. And another guy who loves being the heel, because he sees it all about the payday. So again, look what they did with Seth Rollins. It was like one of the greatest talents in professional wrestling for a long time was lost. And not him lost, the booking of him. And once this character started to come out, and then he started doing all the things that he did, and then last year, starting with, how do you lose 3 times in a row to the same guy who just got brought in back into the company and be more over than you've ever been? Like, that's real talent. The guys that can lose and still get over. And when I think of guys like that, I think of guys like Razor Ramon, lost a lot. Jake Roberts, lost a lot. Diamond Dallas Page, lost a lot, but won some key things. And people, Maya Angelou, an amazing woman from the 40s, 50s, and 60s, a black woman, she said, and when you can get a woman quoted from that era, she was super powerful. And she said, she has a lot of amazing quotes, but the one that I love the most is she said, they won't remember what you did and they won't remember what you said, but they'll always remember the way you made them feel. And just those couple of spots, but the main spot being the bloodline, man, I loved it. It made me, that was must see TV. Anything that any of those guys were doing, any one of them. And the stuff with Sammy was, and Bischoff said this in one of his, one of his 83 weeks, very reminiscent of what I did with the NWO and being the only guy. And the people, you could see him slowly turning him, slowly turning him, slowly turning. Whoom. Next thing you know, Sami Zayn is one of the top baby faces in the business. A guy who's been around for over a decade, can work his ass off, can talk his ass off, and the people care. Like they really care about him. And it's going to be really interesting. I went up to him, at the Rumble, and he was just standing by himself. And Sammy does DDP yoga, and he had thanked me for letting him use the app, which I give it to all the boys and the girls if they want it. And he goes, I use it every day, bro. I said, listen, Sammy, I got to tell you, I love what you're doing. And eventually, man, it's going to explode for you. And he said, God, I hope so. I go, no, bro, see it. You got it. People who say, I'll believe it when I see it, they don't ever see shit. It's the people who say, I see it, so I believe it. When you see it happening, like Cody Rhodes, you don't think he's been manifesting this forever? And now it's happening. And of all places, Hollywood, which he's a pretty good actor too, and he wants to be an actor, but not right now. All he cares about is wrestling. That's all he cares. He is dialed in, just like he was when he was a kid in high school. He is so dialed in that this journey, whatever happens at WrestleMania, you're at the main event. You are in the main event at WrestleMania with, and people will, Cena and Roman, they would turn on him occasionally. It never made sense to me. They're both phenomenal. They put the work in the ring, and now Roman is so good on the mic. So it takes time. It just doesn't happen. My interviews in the beginning and the ones at the end were like completely different. I was like a completely different person along the way. And that's where, I would love when Sammy would do something in the ring and Roman would go back and he just, he's trying so hard to hold back the laughter. You can see it in his face, and he's got that, that son of a bitch. He didn't tell me he was going to say that, or he just did something that made him laugh. And that was the really cool part because Roman's not a heel. He's a heel the way Kevin Nash was a heel. The way Scott Hall was a heel. Super cool. Super cool, guy. They do some things. None of the bloodline are really heels, but they are. But they're not. What did they just do today? Because in one segment, you could have them cheering for him, booing for him, cheering for him, and booing for him. So that's how good. And that is all of this is under the the guys up till the last month of Triple H. And I think he's done a hell of a job. I normally, go to on demand. And I'm zipping through all the boring. I don't zip that far before I stop again. Because, you know, like, now I can't remember their names now, with Finn and
Judgment
what's
Day.
it? Judgment Day. Judgment Day. I love that from Edge starting it to Edge leaving it. Really tough for Edge to be a heel at this point. I mean, because he's such an icon coming back from the neck surgery and having matches that were equally as good to when he left 10 years before. You know, I love what they do with Priest and Dominic. Well, let me talk about, you know, Rhea. She reminds me of another China, because she go out there and beat guys, and I'm going to believe it because she's that good. Plus, I love their look. I love their look. And Dominic, let us, I don't want to spoil anything for people, but he's one of the nicest kids on the planet, man. He really is. I met him before all this started with Ray one day, and just a great kid. And I saw him when I was there for the 30th anniversary. What a great kid. But he was thrown into this. I mean, he's down their performance center all the time, working and working and working, because who the hell goes to a top spot and is that green? You know, but they cover it up and they hide it. But he is doing so good. You know, if I was booking, I would have him winning every week, because the people would lose their minds. They'd be so pissed off, you know, and they're already hate him anyway. Yeah, they kind of love him, but they, you know, as fans, and some of them really hate him. When he starts talking about the being in the joint, like, yeah. I mean, that's really good. There's so many things. I mean, so many the women are just off the chain in WWE. I mean, there's just so many. Bailey's is so amazing, and you know, of course, the man, you know, and then Charlotte. I mean, we got some of the greatest talent of all time. I mean, WrestleMania is going to be unbelievable, man. You know, Punk, you know, he always says what he feels, but overall, he's a pretty classy guy. You know, he says what he says he's going to do. You know, I think Punk's a really good guy. I just think that sometimes, you know, he needs a filter.